His rating is 1176, and I was playing as black, so I was very curious how I would do against an 1176 as black. So we get started. I open with Caro. Once again, exchange, variation, 100% exchange rate for tournament games so far. But he does not open with bishop to d3, he opens with knight to f3, which is pretty common. I respond with my knight, and he responds with an interesting move here with c4. And I thought it was sort of like the Panov he was going for, and in Panov you try to develop quickly in castle. He doesn't know theory. Actually, I'm so sorry, I forgot to go to my review pane again. So we're gonna restart the first couple moves. Doop 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 doop. Okay, so we are doing best moves. Who broke book first? That's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, so first inaccuracy is from Hector, and I go to pin the knight. And I did think about taking the pawn on c4 here because traditionally in Caro, once the bishop has moved, you take the pawn. Ooh, Krishna, I just made tea. Let's see if it's too hot. I think it might be too hot, but I will cash that in eventually. Okay, so yes, I should have taken the pawn. I didn't though, so... and that was just because I was nervous. So you would take, you force white to use a tempo to recapture. Yes, yes, and I know that theoretically. So it was the difference between the heart and the head, you know, where the head knew, but just in the moment I was like, no, I can't. Hello, Dan, welcome. You feel like your work schedule is conspiring to keep you away from streams? Well, it's nice to have you here. I just started reviewing game 3 from Saturday's tournament, and it's an interesting one. It is an interesting one. So I didn't take, even though I know I should have, you know I should have, we agree on that. So let's just shake and move on, yes? And at this point, I'm developed, except queen, but you know, it's fine. And so I do start attacking that pawn chain because, wouldn't you know, that pawn became an issue for me. And Hector's idea here was to add defense to c5, but didn't realize it just hangs a pawn. So I grabbed that pawn for free. And this is where, in my opinion, the game gets really interesting. Yes, advantage is strongly to me, but not without some huge pitfalls I had to avoid to play for a win. So what Hector's doing here is he's trying to put pressure on b-file. And I realize I have enough of an arsenal to not have to move my knight, but instead to capture with a pawn, which adds a defender, and even when they capture back, I can add another defender. But here's where he starts to add pressure. So he now has 2 attackers on my knight, and I don't have a great way to add defense from my back rank because he's got this bishop lasered in on b8. So I gave this a really solid think and realized that, hello, Amuser. I realized that I was going to add defense by pushing my pawn. Why not a5? Why not indeed? That was my move. And he again tries to put pressure on the knight on b4. But luckily, I have an escape square for my knight now. Because if you'll notice, before here, my knight doesn't have any safe squares. Here, dead. Here, dead. Here, dead. So it was a little bit trapped. But moving to a5 allows the knight to escape. And was it the best move? No. Okay. Hello, beginners player. Oh, I like that emote. That's a cool one. Bishop takes knight looks interesting. On f3, yeah, Engine has been begging for me to make that move. But we were very focused queenside at this point. So this is just going to hang out here for a minute. Remember, Hector is about 1200. My over the board vision is new, so accurate play is sometimes happening, but not always. And so again, Hector is adding a ton of pressure to my pieces, where right now he is threatening to win this pawn. So I gave this a good think and realized that moving the bishop worked because my bishop is defended by the queen, adding defense to the pawn. And Hector adds more attackers. And remember, b8, not an option for me because of Hector's dark squared bishop. So how do I get out of this? How do I keep my pieces? By attacking the queen. And if Hector goes for my bishop now, he loses his queen. So even though there isn't technically enough defense on my pawn, it doesn't matter because he has to deal with this threat. And he does by moving the queen completely out of the way, which allows me the tempo to move my knight to a square that adds defense to this bishop. Engine recommends b7, which in hindsight, yes, I agree. I was a little concerned about how much pressure he had on b-file. Takezo, you're 100% right. But Engine is in my favor, and I realized this too because I am up 2 pawns, and I ended up 2 pawns by allowing this b-file action to happen. So yes, he has some very strong counterplay here, but ultimately it wasn't enough to convert the advantage out of my favor. But he keeps going, you know, he continues to try to mobilize onto my side of the board, and I was feeling the pressure. Like, all of his pieces are descending upon on my side of the board, and it was uncomfortable. And so I am completely content to make a couple trades here because I am up a couple pawns, and removing any of his pressure from my side of the board was a-okay by me. I offer another trade here. He does not take it, so I take. And then I move my knight back here. Engine thinks e4 would have been stronger, and I understand the rationale why is because it, you know, moves it closer to Hector's side of the board, and also potential some fork, you know, ideas here. But I move here to threaten the queen and try to add some support to b8 because, again, b8 feels like it's been a huge weakness in this game since I haven't gotten to develop a Luft yet. I move my queen. I can't quite remember what my rationale is for this move, if I'm being honest. But finally, I get a small breather. Small breather where Hector makes a Luft. I think he realized his back rank was weak. So I took the same tempo to create a Luft. You know, it was one of those moments in battle where you're like, okay, break. And then we go back in. And, oh, I remember why I moved my queen here. My reason for moving my queen here was to begin to allow my rooks to coordinate. And I liked this move a lot because they can't, or Hector can't block with a rook since my knight can get involved. I suppose they could have brought the knight in, but they didn't. They moved queen away, which is best move. And I offer a trade. I don't like this move. But I just wanted the queen off the board, and this does kind of force it because she's on a dark square, horse is on a light square, and Hector can't bring in a rook to help because of my pawn. So it forces a queen trade. So he takes, and I don't like this move because it gives me an isolated pawn. It's a passed pawn, sure, but it's isolated when it was previously connected to a pretty strong pawn chain. So I take, and Hector starts to try to capitalize on that, but I move a knight to try to add some defense. Oh, this is such a savage move. Such a savage mood, because now my rook can't move. Can't go here. Can't go here. So I'm thinking, what can I do to... yeah, poor rook. I don't want this for you. I don't. So I do account for it soon, but I realized that I didn't want to allow Hector to have a way to attack my pawn on c4, even though it's an isolated pawn in the center of the board. Obviously, it's going to get attacked. It's probably lost, but that's okay. You think this guy was new to chess? He played pretty solid so far. Yeah, I think he played a phenomenal game. And I really enjoyed playing this game. Where, I mean, obviously it's more enjoyable when you win, but I thought Hector's counterplay was really clever, and it was super fun to try to dance around. So this is where he begins to blunder more seriously, where I do have an advantage of 2 pawns, but it's not super clear. But the way he coordinates his rooks over the next few moves it's not it. Where I am adding defense to my poor little pawn. I should have just let it go. But I didn't. And I decided, I guess, to play best move on the opposite side of the board. Good for me. Don't ask me why I made that move. Just intuition or something, maybe. But I think, honestly, it's because I saw Hector start to activate his king. I wanted to activate my king. Yeah, it was a good move. It was best move. But I can't articulate to you why I made that move. GM move? Yes. Random pawn moves that are correct, GM moves. Every time. And yeah, so I wanted to bring my king in. And this is where the blunder happens. It says mistake, but it was the end of the game, in my opinion, because it allowed me to offer a check. And these back rank checks with tempo are themes in this game and my next game. Where that check allowed me to reroute to put 2 attackers on the knight, and there's no recovering it. He tries counterplay. Yes, he will get a knight for a rook, but I have a lot going on here. And now my idea, because Hector put his king on the 3rd instead of the 1st, which apparently was best move, but remember how I said I wanted to eventually move this pawn to allow my rook some breathing room? Well, rook has breathing room now, but look at this. And he doesn't spot it. He doesn't spot it. Rook c8 would have been a really great counterplay move to force me to potentially deal with, but he doesn't spot it. I pin the rook. And to his credit, he does play on a little bit longer, but I realize I can remove the defender because his rationale for going to d3 was to not give his rook away for free. But I can kick that defender, and he then offers the trade here instead. And here he moved the knight to c4 to prevent me from well, it's actually a dual move where it prevents me from taking on a3, but it also prevents me from continuing to keep my passed pawn if I choose to push it. So I threaten the horse instead, forcing it to move so I can grab that pawn. And now I make the knight move out. He moves it to best square. I continue my push, and he should have taken here because now I can pin the knight and he resigns. So that was the end of the game. And yeah, I really enjoyed playing this game. He was a phenomenal opponent. He told me afterwards he thought I played really, really well. And I said likewise. It was really interesting. He had so much attack power going on in this middle game. And if I slipped up even once defending with the wrong piece, it would have been game over. Time on.